Why is a 40 decibel sound sometimes completely silent to you, but a tiny, barely there 3 decibel sound is perfectly clear? Seriously, think about that for a second. We're so used to thinking of decibels like a volume dial on a TV, right? Just an absolute measure of what we can hear. But human hearing, it's way more deceptive and, honestly, mathematically fascinating than just a simple volume dial.
Here's a real-life problem straight out of acoustics. If I play a low 60 Hz rumble at an intensity of 40 decibels, most people will hear absolutely nothing. It's practically invisible to your ears. Yet, if I play a high-pitched 5,000 Hz squeak at just 3 decibels, which is literally a tiny fraction of the physical power, you'll hear it loud and clear. By the end of this explainer, you're going to understand exactly why that happens, the physical formulas behind it, and how the biological machinery in your head translates those invisible pressure waves into a literal symphony of sound.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We're looking at the limits of human hearing, pitch, loudness, and timbre, phons versus decibels, the mechanics of the ear, and finally, hearing loss and implants. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The limits of human hearing, specifically that 20 to 20,000 Hz range.
To understand how we hear, we really have to establish a baseline. Normal human hearing covers frequencies from a deep, low rumble of about 20 Hz all the way up to a piercing 20,000 Hz. But sound obviously exists way outside our little window. Sounds dropping below 20 Hz are called infrasound. That's what elephants actually use to communicate over super long distances. And on the flip side, sound waves vibrating faster than 20,000 Hz, that's ultrasound. Dogs can hear up to 30,000 Hz, and bats and dolphins, they can perceive incredibly high frequencies zooming all the way up to 100,000 Hz. Wild, right?
Moving on to Section 2. Pitch, loudness, and timbre. Let's translate physics into perception.
We toss around words like pitch and loudness every single day, right? But how do they actually map onto cold, hard physics? Look at how we separate what your brain perceives from what the sound wave is physically doing. So the perception of pitch is directly tied to the physical quantity of frequency. And we are super sensitive to this. We can tell two sounds apart even if their frequencies differ by just 0.3%. Loudness, on the other hand, is trickier. It's determined by both intensity and frequency. Now keep that in your back pocket, because that combo is the key to our opening mystery. And finally, we've got timbre.
Now, you might be asking yourself, wait a minute, if pitch is just frequency, what makes a violin playing middle Cs sound completely different from a piano playing the exact same middle C? It's a great question. The answer is timbre. You see, a violin doesn't just pump out one pure frequency. It produces this distinctive, complex mix of multiple frequencies and intensities all happening at once. Timbre is simply the number and relative intensity of those multiple frequencies playing together. Think of it like the unique acoustic fingerprint of an instrument, or even your own voice.
All right, Section 3. Phons versus decibels explained. How we actually measure loudness.
Okay, this specific topic trips up physics students literally everywhere, so let's get absolute clarity on this. We're dealing with two completely different units here. The decibel is a unit of physical intensity. It just measures the raw physical power of the sound wave in watts per meter squared. But the phon? The phon is a unit of loudness perception. It is entirely subjective to the human brain. Now, at exactly 1,000 Hz, phons are defined to be numerically equal to decibels. Nice and easy. But the moment you stray away from that 1,000 Hz mark, those numbers basically start ignoring each other entirely.
And this right here brilliantly explains our opening paradox. Remember, why is a 60 Hz sound at 40 decibels completely invisible to your ears? It's because human hearing isn't flat. If you map it out on a graph, you get these things called equal-loudness curves. Basically, our ears have a massive sweet spot of maximum sensitivity right between 2,000 and 5,000 Hz. That low 60 Hz sound at 40 decibels, it actually falls directly on what's called the zero phon curve. Zero phons is the absolute threshold of hearing. It registers as nothing to your brain. But that tiny, weak, 3 decibel sound sitting at 5,000 Hz, that falls squarely in our ear's sweet spot. It rises above that zero phon curve, making it perfectly audible. So physics dictates the power, but your biology dictates the perception.
And that brings us to Section 4, the mechanics of the ear. Let's look at your built-in biological amplifier. At its very core, the human ear is a transducer. Now, in physics, a transducer is just a device that converts one form of energy into another. The sound wave slamming into your ear is a mechanical pressure wave, right?
Well, your ear acts like a highly sophisticated microphone, converting those physical, mechanical waves into electrical nerve impulses that your brain can actually read and understand.
Let's trace the exact path of one of these sound waves. Step 1, it hits the outer ear, or the ear canal, which carries the sound to your wonderfully protected eardrum. Fun fact, the column of air inside actually resonates, which is a big part of why we have that sensitivity sweet spot around 2,000 to 5,000 hertz. Then step 2, we hit the middle ear, where the vibrations hit a tiny lever system of bones. And finally, step 3, the inner ear, specifically a structure called the cochlea, where that mechanical signal officially becomes electrical.
Now the real magic happens in that middle ear. If sound waves tried to pass straight from the air into the fluid of the inner ear, they would basically just bounce right off. So your middle ear steps in as a mechanical lever system. It takes the force exerted on the eardrum, amplifies it, and creates pressure waves in the inner ear that are a staggering 40 times greater than the original sound wave. 40 times! It is an absolutely incredible piece of biological engineering.
But hang on, what if a sound is way too loud? Let's do a quick real-life check. Have you ever heard that humming can actually protect your ears while, say, shooting a gun? It's true. Hidden in your middle ear are two tiny muscles. When they are exposed to super intense sounds, they react in literally milliseconds to stiffen up that lever system. This drastically reduces the physical force transmitted inward, protecting your delicate inner ear. And here's the coolest part. Your own voice triggers this reflex automatically.
Okay, so once that amplified pressure wave finally reaches the inner ear, it enters the cochlea, which kind of looks like a coiled-up snail shell. Inside there, pressure waves cause a membrane to vibrate, which rubs against these tiny hair cells called cilia. But how on earth does it decode the frequency? Well, it uses spatial mapping. High frequencies resonate and stimulate the nerves right at the entrance, the near end. Low frequencies have to travel further down the coil to stimulate the far end. So your brain literally reads the pitch based on exactly which hairs are being rubbed. How wild is that?
Which brings us to Section 5, hearing loss and implants. Basically what happens when this intricate system fails.
So what exactly happens when this incredibly delicate mechanical system gets damaged? Well, we can test hearing using an audiogram, and it typically reveals two very common but very different types of hearing loss. First, there's noise exposure. Think of a kid playing with loud cap guns. That typically damages specific hair cells, creating a really sharp, distinct dip in hearing sensitivity right around 4,000 hertz. But the most common form of hearing loss comes with age, and it's called presbycusis. This is a progressive loss that starts at the highest frequencies. Because those higher frequencies fade first, an older person will noticeably struggle to understand the higher frequency conversational speech of a woman long before they struggle with deeper male voices.
Now, if the damage is located in the middle ear, meaning those tiny amplifier bones are broken, we can actually outsmart the biology. Conductive hearing losses can be partially overcome by pressing a special hearing aid directly against the bone behind the ear. This uses bone conduction to send vibrations straight through your skull bone and directly into the cochlea, completely bypassing that broken middle ear altogether.
But what if the cochlea itself is damaged? More specifically, what if those tiny hair cells, the cilia, are dead, but the auditory nerve is still alive? Well, in the 1970s, Graham Clark pioneered the cochlear implant, and it is a total marvel of modern physics and medicine. Instead of just amplifying sound like a normal hearing aid, it uses an array of about 24 electrodes threaded directly inside the cochlea. A microphone on the outside picks up sound, converts it to electrical signals, and then those electrodes directly shock the auditory nerve, artificially emulating the exact job of those missing hair cells.
All right, before we wrap up, let's summarize the absolutely key takeaways you'll want for your notes. First, human hearing ranges from 20 to 20,000 hertz. Second, remember that pitch is a physical frequency, but loudness is a biological perception measured in phones. Third, your middle ear mechanically amplifies sound pressure by an amazing 40 times. And finally, when the inner ear's transducer fails, cochlear implants step in to artificially emulate the job of those tiny cilia.
And this brings us to a final, pretty provocative thought to leave you with. We established that our biological microphones strictly tap out at 20,000 hertz, right? So how in the world can doctors use sound waves operating at millions of hertz to literally see a baby inside the human body? What actually happens when a sound becomes so incredibly high-pitched that it starts behaving a bit more like light? Well, that is the absolutely fascinating physics of ultrasound, and it's exactly what we'll be tackling in our next